I'm going to share a story I've never shared publicly before. How I almost got scammed. Yes, almost. It was literally on a knife's edge. How I almost got scammed of 5.57 Bitcoin worth, more than $550,000 in today's value of Bitcoin in some really sophisticated e-commerce sale. Ready for the story? All right, let's dig in. So, as you may know or may not know, I'm into e-commerce and I've sold 2 brands before. And I had a brand up on a website called Businesses for Sale that I was going to sell. The first brand I sold via a broker. The second one, I was a lot more experienced. I found a buyer directly here in Dubai where I live. And for the third one, I thought, you know what, I'm fairly experienced in this whole buying and selling M&A space of e-commerce. I'm going to sell this one directly as well. So long story short, we put up a brand on Businesses for Sale and someone reached out. Loads of inquiries, but someone reached out, a guy called Raphael, okay? And he said, oh, I'm interested in your business. And we got on a call, we discussed some main headline details, nothing too specific, but it was a good initial call. And this was for one of my other brands. I had 2 brands at the time, and I was going to sell one of them. So we were discussing this, and from our conversation, he said he's got many investors that he manages money for. And he said, if you have anything else, let me know. And I said, hold on, actually, I do have another brand. And then this was a much bigger brand. And I told him about the brand, and he said, oh, cool, send me some more details. So I sent him some more details. And then we had a follow-up call the next day with one of his partners, whose name I forgot. All of these calls were on WhatsApp. So it was a WhatsApp call, voice call. Their profile pics were of a watch or something. So I never really got to see their face. But we had a very pleasant conversation. These guys were from Switzerland. They were based in Switzerland. It was a UK number +44. And they were in Barcelona. Apparently they were in Barcelona at the time, closing on some deal. So we had a call, a second call, again, very productive. They were throwing some big numbers out there, and obviously it was very exciting, but I'm a very cautious guy. I'm from the streets of London, so it takes a lot to kind of get me excited and, to wave a carrot in front of my eyes. I'm not going to try and bite it straight away. I was cautiously excited. I think that's the right way to put it. So following that call, they said, great, send us a brochure. So I didn't even have one at the time. I cooked one up using Canva, sent it over to them. A few days later, I now speak with their CEO based in Geneva. So we had this really good call. Again, a WhatsApp voice call, and I couldn't see his face. And we had a really good call. He was in Geneva. They told me about their company, what they do, and they are a very successful family office. He gave me the name. I looked them up. I did some really, some deep digging into their company, and they were registered with the Swiss authorities. And they had a website. It wasn't, it was a decent website. I always try to look for clues in a website to see, hold on, is it legit? Why is there a typo there? But it looked fairly legit, and I know websites. This is what I do for a living. I build conversion, I obsess over these small things. So I didn't see anything that was a screaming red flag, okay? So we have multiple calls over, 3, 4, or even 5 weeks, talking about the deal structure and what it might look like. And they said they would invest about 2.5 million euros to acquire 25%. So not even the whole business, but 2.5 million for 25%. And I thought, okay, that's a pretty good deal. That values the business at 10 million euros, which was an overvaluation. It wasn't worth 10 million euros at the time. It was worth a lot less than that. It's worth now, a fairly large amount 2 years on. But at that time, it was a very generous valuation. I thought, wow, for only 25%, 2.5 mil, don't mind if I do. So he said the way we're going to structure the deal is via what's called a convertible note. And I used to work in banking many years ago. I worked for BlackRock and Lehman Brothers before they went bankrupt, and Deutsche. So I'm fairly familiar with these kinds of instruments, but I still had to, refresh and do some further research. But he said it's going to be via a convertible note. That will be a 2-year note. And a convertible note is basically an interest-bearing instrument that converts into equity at the end of the specified duration. And this duration was 2 years. So they were going to invest 2.5 million euros. It wouldn't immediately be equity. It would convert into equity for them after 2 years, providing we met some deadlines and some targets. And if I don't, then they basically get their money back. So it protects the investor. And as soon as I heard the word interest, I'm like, hey, bro, I'm Muslim, haram. I don't deal with interest. And he said, oh, really? That's fine, he said. His name was Carl. He said, really, that's fine. We've worked with many Muslim clients in the past, from Dubai and Amsterdam and Morocco, blah, blah, blah. And so we have a methodology, a workaround for our Muslim clients. I said, wow, these guys are pretty sick. Like, that sounds good. So he said the way we're going to do it is, he said, instead of structuring it as an interest-bearing convertible note, we're going to structure it around Bitcoin. And I'm not scared of crypto or Bitcoin. I know the space fairly well. So when he said Bitcoin, I didn't immediately think scam, scam, scam. I just thought, okay, cool. These guys must be quite savvy. So he said the way it's going to work is you will buy the Bitcoin. So me, Jamal, will buy the Bitcoin, and we will hold on to that Bitcoin for 2 years. And whatever happens to that Bitcoin, whether it appreciates or depreciates, that's going to be the equivalent of our interest, whatever we would have earned in interest on our convertible note. If it goes down, that risk is on us. I'm like, okay. So you want me to buy Bitcoin, and then I give you that Bitcoin, and then whatever happens to it is on you. And in exchange, you give me 2.5 million euros. And the amount of Bitcoin they wanted me to buy was about $200,000. About $200,000 worth of Bitcoin. I buy that amount of Bitcoin, and then I give it to them, and we do like an exchange. They send me the wire, they hold onto that Bitcoin, and the appreciation of that Bitcoin, or the projected appreciation, will be the equivalent of whatever they would have earned in interest in the original structure of the convertible note. And it was a lot to wrap my head around. I'm sure you as well. I'm like, And I'm like, okay, interesting. So in terms of the actual Sharia compliance, whether or not this was Islamically sound, I wasn't too sure. I have an advisor or a really trustworthy Islamic finance expert in Florida, who I was a client of his, and he's just a really, really top guy, Joe Bradford. And I sent him the terms, and he looked at it. We got on a call, he studied it, and then he said, Jamal, it looks okay. Islamically, it looks okay. So I said, okay, cool. So the way they wanted us to do this was very interesting. They said, Jamal, you need to buy the Bitcoin, show us that you've bought it. And you can see the video next to me now where I'm actually buying the Bitcoin on one of my exchanges. And then once you buy the Bitcoin, keep it in your exchange or wherever you bought it. Buy a brand new ledger. So a brand new ledger, which is a hard wallet, a cold hard wallet that can store Bitcoin. And then you open, and then you meet us. Then you transfer the Bitcoin onto the ledger, you seal it, then you hold onto the ledger in my possession, so Jamal's possession. So I have the Bitcoin in the ledger, and then they will wire me the funds. Once I have the funds, I give them the ledger, And then boom. So I'm like, oh, so the risk, so they don't get the ledger or the Bitcoin until I get the funds. So I'm giving them $200,000 and they're giving me back 2.5 million euros, which is more than $2.5 million. So I thought, well, it's more than a 10x. I'm like, okay, so there's no risk. And then they said, Jamal, we're conducting business in Rome right now. So meet us in Rome. I'm like, Rome? I'm like, why the heck are you in Rome? And I'm like, and then I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? I've never been to Rome. So I'm like, okay. So this was going to be an initial meeting in Rome. We hadn't done any kind of Bitcoin buying or anything up until now. So they said, Jamal, meet us in Rome and let's meet face to face. And I really pushed for a Zoom call meeting, a video call meeting, because up until now, I haven't seen their face. And I asked one of my friends who had worked in Geneva in Switzerland before, is this how Swiss do business? Do they do business face-to-face only? They don't do Zoom? He said, yeah, it's quite common. So I took his word for it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to Rome. So the way I kind of rationalized it was, hold on, this could be one big charade and nothing could come of it. They might not even be there. But at least I get to go to Rome and make a holiday out of it. So to me, it was a zero risk expedition. So I called up one of my friends in London. I said, hey, bro, I'm going to Rome. I told him about the backstory. Can you meet me in Rome? He said, Jamal, done. I covered his expenses. He came out and we convened in Rome. Okay, so we meet in Rome. We stay in a hotel on one of the main streets. Not in the same room, by the way. Okay, no homo. Anyway, we meet up, we hang out that evening, and then we have a meeting the next day at the Eden Hotel with these supposed investors. So the way we positioned ourselves was I'm the e-commerce entrepreneur and my friend was my advisor or my attorney, okay? So even though he wasn't. So he came, he rocked up in a slick suit. And I came just in my casual clothes, just being me. So we go to the Eden Hotel, which was where the meeting was, which was one of the best hotels in Rome. It's one of the James Bond movies were filmed there. And we rock up, and there are two guys there waiting for us in the lobby, and we meet them, very slick, both Swiss. One was half Italian, half Swiss, but the other one was fully Swiss. And the other one was the chief financial officer. And we go upstairs to one amazing restaurant, and we're eating Italian food in Italy. And it was just amazing. And we had, a 3-course meal. We talk shop, we shoot the breeze, and then we start talking business. And we review everything that I had previously discussed with the CEO, Carl, and everything just goes really smooth, like really well. And they cover the bill. It was a few €100, and then they just walk out. And up until now, I haven't bought the Bitcoin. I haven't done anything. It was just a very smooth interaction. And me and my friend, for the next 2 days after that, we just hang out in Rome and just do all of these touristy things. And I'm on cloud 9 because I think, hold on, these guys, there was just a lot of trust that was built in that interaction. They said all the right things, and it was just overwhelmingly very positive. So now we agree to do the transaction 2 weeks from that initial meeting. So I go back to Dubai, and then in that time I buy the Bitcoin, and then we agree to meet in Rome again 2 weeks later. So I go to Rome again. But before I go to Rome, my wife was a bit concerned about this, as she should have been. She said, Jamal, there are some red flags. I said, yeah, you're right. There are some, maybe not red, but there were some pink flags. And we just sat down and we thought long and hard about what all of the risks were. So there were only 2 risks, okay? There were 2 main risks in this entire interaction. The first, or this entire, collaboration, or whatever you want to call it. The main risk was that they never send the money. I buy the Bitcoin and I have the Bitcoin. So I'm like, that's not a big deal. Bitcoin doesn't fluctuate that crazily, and I can just sell it again or keep it or whatever, right? So that's the first risk, and that wasn't a big deal. That wasn't a big deal. The other risk was I can transfer the Bitcoin onto the ledger, meet them in person, and they can just manhandle me and just basically take the ledger by force, run away with it. Now they have the ledger. I don't have the money, the investment, and it's all gone. So that was the first real risk, okay? The second risk was, if you know how ledgers or wallets work, is there are some secret words attached or connected to every wallet, usually 12 or 24 words. These 12 or 24 random words that must be used in that specific order, they can unlock access to any wallet. Obviously, it's virtually impossible to guess what these 24 words are in a very specific order. It could be random words like donkey, keyboard, rice, water, just completely random. Virtually impossible for anyone to guess. But if anyone knows those words, they can gain access to your ledger. So the other risk is that they somehow get to find out what those words were. So I thought about it and I said, okay, so the way to mitigate against this is, number one, I need to make sure I'm protected. So I'm not manhandled. I'm a fairly strong guy, you know. I used to do some kung fu and boxing back in the day, actually. Well, I'm not a fighter, but I can hold my own. But if I'm surrounded by 5-10 guys, I'm not sure I'd be able to survive, all right? So I thought the first risk is I need to protect myself. So we chose the venue. We chose the venue of the meeting place. I couldn't let them pick where the transaction was going to take place. So there's a good friend of mine called Francesco, who I play football with in Dubai, and he connected me with the manager of the Bulgari Hotel in Rome, one of the finest hotels in Rome. And he gave me a really good rate on one of their exclusive presidential meeting rooms. They host presidents and ministers and prime ministers in this meeting room. And he said, Jamal, this is a super protected location. He gave me 2 big security guards, bodyguards if you will, who were manning the door the entire time. So he said, Jamal, this is how you can do it. I was going to do it somewhere else, and I even looked into hiring a bodyguard with guns. I thought, you know, no, that's an overkill. Let's do it here. So we communicated, this is where we want to do the transaction. There was a bit of pushback, but we held our ground. Boom. And the second risk was we could not let them in any way, shape or form find out or expose the 24 secret words of the ledger that I was going to open in front of them. That was the other risk. So I thought about it. I thought, okay, cool, Jamal, you've got to be very, very careful. So we fly back to Rome, me and my friend. Again, I cover him. I tell him, bro, come out. Solid dude. He comes out. And I told him, you know, just to thank you for your time. If this deal goes through, bro, I'll cover you. I'll give you like a nice kickback just to show my appreciation. And for showing up, man, taking time out of your busy schedule in London. He had his own life going on, but he came through, man. He came through, and that says a lot about what kind of friend he is. So it's the morning of the transaction, and I wake up to pray Fajr, the morning prayer. I pray. It's about 6 a.m. The meeting is at 1 p.m. at the Bulgari Hotel. And I'm like, okay, you know, I've got 6 hours. Let me see if I can get some more sleep. I couldn't for the life of me. Just very anxious and excited, I guess. So I stay up. I start doing push-ups. I just get mentally ready and just really rehearse everything. I've opened ledgers before. I know how to unlock it, but I didn't want to fumble in front of them and make silly mistakes. So I bought 2 ledgers with me. One that I was gonna use in the meeting itself, and the other one I was gonna practice and rehearse right then. So I started to rehearse the entire process, how to open it, and I get really comfortable with it, okay? So we go to the meeting room an hour early, and just as it was promised, the meeting room, amazing, 2 security guards. There's all the snacks there, massive meeting room. Here's a picture of it right here next to me. And we rock up, and me and my friend are just hanging out, talking, and then finally they rock up. They rock up, we sit down, we shoot the breeze for a bit, and then they say, okay, cool, let's get down to business. And they hand me a piece of paper with the numbers 1 to 24. So it's numbered 1 to 24. And they give me a notepad to lean on. And they say, Jamal, here is where you write down the numbers, all of the words. And we've written 1 to 24 for you. And I take that off them. And then they say, Jamal, just so that we don't see it in any way, shape or form, go to the end of the very large meeting table and write down the words over there. And I thought, okay, cool, they understand the drill, and I appreciated that level of privacy. So I go over to the other side of the table, I open the ledger, and then I do what I'd been rehearsing, which is just writing down all the words. But then this is where the second risk about them finding out the words, this is where the second risk becomes possible, which is, hold on, they've given me the paper, the notepad to lean on, and the pen. I've got to be careful, because if they find out the words, then they could never send me the wire, and they could just take all the Bitcoin in the ledger. So I look at the pen that they gave me, and I'm looking at it, and I don't feel good about it, so I toss it. And then I grab one of my pens. One of the guys makes a comment about, hold on, why aren't you using that pen? I'm like, no, whatever. I brushed him off. And then I grabbed the piece of paper and then I put it up against the light to see, is it some kind of funny paper? And hey, Midi, what's up? I'm sharing the story of when I went to Rome. Okay. So what happened then was, so I look at the paper and it looks okay. Nothing too fishy about the paper. So I write down the first 2 words leaning on the notepad, and then I get a funny feeling about the notepad. It was a Mont Blanc notepad, and after I write down the first 2 words, I toss the notepad, and then I lean the paper against the table, and then I copy the 24 words, I fold the piece of paper, put it in my back pocket, and then I circle back and sit where I was sitting at the table opposite our 2 investors. And then now it's time to actually transfer the Bitcoin from my exchange to the ledger. And as I always do, I always transfer a small amount first, just to make sure it goes through and there aren't any hiccups. So I send $100 worth of Bitcoin to the ledger, and it lands safely. I check it. Everything is all very, very, very smooth. And then this is where one of the investors gets a phone call. He gets a phone call, and then he steps outside for a few minutes, and then comes back in. And then he says, Jamal, we'll need to copy down the words again. I'm like, huh? I'm like, what do you mean? I've already got the words. He said, yeah, but we need to do it again. And this time, one of the other guys, the CFO, needs to sign at the bottom. I'm like, that makes 0 sense whatsoever. You cannot see the words until I get the wire. He said, yeah, but then he just gave me some really rubbish, nonsensical, completely just ridiculous reasoning. And I'm like, that makes 0 sense whatsoever. I cannot let you see the words. And then my friend, bless him, he starts to side with them. He says, Jamal, just let them. There's no way they can memorize all 24 words in that order. So just let them copy it and let the guy sign it, and then I get to keep both copies of the words. I'm like, that makes 0 sense. And now they're kind of almost ganging up on me and trying to say, no, just do it, it's not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm just sat there and I'm like, this is complete BS. And then I pretend that I concede. I say, and then I told him, you know what, go ahead, do it. So he comes round, he's sat on his side of the table. He comes round and he comes in between me and my friend. And then I give him the words, and then he starts to copy down the words leaning on that same notepad. And at this point, I'm just boiling up. I'm keeping my cool. On the surface, it looks like I'm playing along, but I'm just fuming. I'm just kind of like getting really agitated at this point, because this makes zero sense. And I don't care if you're throwing 10, $100 million at me. I wasn't born yesterday, and I'm not stupid. So he comes around, and then he copies down all of the words. And then once he gets to the last 24th word, this is where I spring into action. And then I kind of grab him. I say, hey, let me see that notepad. And then he says no. And he gets super defensive. And then he goes back to his side of the table. And this is where I absolutely lose it. I don't get angry very often. In fact, rarely. I don't remember the last time I lost it. But then I absolutely lost it. And I said, I want to see that notepad. He said, no. I'm like, hold on. I'm like, I don't know what's going on over here, but there's something freaking fishy about this entire thing. And that notepad, I think, has something to do with it. And then the whole thing just explodes. And I chucked them out the room, and they storm out. One of them left their bag behind. But anyway, they came back and got it. But they storm out, and I'm just there, pacing up and down, fuming, like, well, what the heck is going on? And then my friend has no idea how the whole thing just escalated out of thin air, literally thin air. To him, things were going really well. He was about to get his kickback. Everything was going really smoothly. And then he goes, Jamal, what just happened? And he thinks I'm being paranoid. I tell him, dude, I'm telling you, bro, there's something about this whole thing that makes zero sense. And then he says, Jamal, you're being paranoid. Let's call them back, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, there's no way. And I'm just fuming. And he's really, and he started to make me feel like I made a mistake, but I'm holding my ground. And then he says, Jamal, you know what? It was a Mont Blanc notepad. Let's look it up. I tell him, great idea. So we find the exact same notepad that they were leaning on. And well, you can just see for yourself. I'm going to play the video. Yeah, if you haven't figured it out by now, it was a notepad that digitizes and sends to the cloud anything that you write on it. So when one of them got a phone call, he was being told by someone else that, hey, we don't have all the words. He only wrote down the first 2 words, so we need to do it again. So by me not writing on that notepad, I circumvented their plan and just threw it into complete disarray. And that's why they needed to write it again and then hand me the paper so that they could have their own digital copy on the cloud. And I'm like, wow, that would have been a very clean scam. Why? Because I would have thought that I have the words. I was the only one who had possession of the words. I would have thought it was only me. But this entire time, they would have it as well. They would have got a new ledger, restored the wallet, gained access to the Bitcoin, wiped it clean, and then they never would have sent any wire. So I would have walked away from the meeting. The wire was going to land shortly afterwards. I was going to walk away from the meeting with the ledger, thinking the Bitcoin was still in it, and I would have waited for the wire to come. One day would have passed, 2 days, 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, and no wire would have ever landed. And I might have asked them, hey, what's going on? Why hasn't a wire come? And they would have maybe delayed me or sent me some fake PDF proof that, hey, it's being sent, check with your bank, blah, 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 blah. And then maybe after a long enough time, I would have got fed up about this whole thing. And I would have said, you know what, at least I've still got my Bitcoin. And then I would have opened the ledger thinking, right, you know what, I've got the Bitcoin. Those guys are wasting my time. Let me now, take the Bitcoin out of the ledger or keep it in there, sell it, whatever, right? And I would have opened the ledger and nothing would have been in it. It would have been wiped clean. And I wouldn't have known what happened because only I supposedly had the secret words. And I would have been scratching my head forever because I'm like, what the heck happened? Because I would say 99% of people wouldn't have suspected anything with the notepad. It was such a clean, operation. And to this day, I would have been scratching my head thinking, what happened to the Bitcoin? They would have complete plausible deniability because, hold on, it's only you had the words, Jamal. We never had the words. Maybe there's something wrong with the ledger. Maybe you didn't actually send it, blah, blah, blah. And I would have just been racking my brain for eternity. But thanks to God and my extreme paranoia, I was able to stay clean and have a very, a cool story to tell. So I hope you enjoyed it. Stay safe, stay grounded, and until next time, peace.